Hi, I'm Marcia Winbeckler, and in this video I want to show you how I use a great product from CakeStructure.com. So some of the supplies that we're going to need is, I'm going to use acrylic discs, and I'm using them that are 1/2 inch larger than the diameter of my cake. So I'm using 8-inch cake, so I'm going to be using 8.5 inch diameter acrylic discs. Now they do come in 1/4 inch sizes too, so like 8 1/4. So they're available in halves and 1/4s, depending on how much your cake shrink or how thick you want your ganache or icing to be. Takes 2 of these per size to do this in the, I don't do my cakes in the upside down method. I find that that's just a lot of cake, especially for the double barrel ones to be flipping. So I'm going to show you how to do it so you don't have to do that. Okay, now I'm going to cover my acrylic disc with some of the pressable plastic wrap, and it seals as you pull on it. And I'm going to make sure that my plastic wrap has the sticky side up and that I've got it nice and smooth underneath, so there's no air bubbles there, because that's the side that will go towards the ganache that's going on top of the cake. Remove some of the corners to avoid some bulk on top also, so I will cut the corners off here. And I want a nice smooth edge on this because my scraper will be going around the edges, so I don't want any large bulk building up on the edges, so I'm pulling it nice and tight around here. And I just want to do that all the way around the acrylic circle. And that's just similar to how you cover a cake board. See right here, I don't want that to be sticking out like that. I need to pull that in nice and tight. And so I want to get a nice tight seal all around the edge here and have it be smooth. And the reason that you need your top not to have a lot of bulk on it is because you're going to need to make sure your cake is level, and you'll need to set a level in the center. So now what I want to do, see, now I've got it nice and smooth on this side, and this is the side that will go against the ganache. Okay, my next step is I've just got a working board here that's going to make it a little bit easier to lift my disc, and then a piece of non-skid. And then I'm going to put my acrylic disc that has the plastic coating on it with the plastic side, covered side up. And again, you want to not have air bubbles in that. So I've got that sticking up, and then I'm going to take my ganache. I'm just going to put a thin coat of this on my plastic disc, my acrylic disc, and I'm trying to keep any air bubbles from forming between the ganache and the acrylic disc and the covering that's on it. And so I'm going to do that to the whole disc. And then once I've got it fully covered, I can go back with a larger spatula if I want and kind of get a smooth. So I'll clean up the edges here with my palette knife, and then I will just set this aside and let it set up a while. And I can let it set up while I am stacking and filling my cake. Hi, to cover a cake with ganache, you're of course going to want your cake, and it can be either your standard height tier, or in this case I'm using what's called a double barrel or a double high tier. And for a double barrel tier, the difference is that the cake it's basically 2 tiers of the same diameter or same size stacked as one and covered in icing as one. So I'm going to put a little inset here on how I supported it in the center, just like I would between any other 2 tiers, using my sturdy cake plate method and locking pillars. So to stack the cakes, I do them just like I would a typical cake for the first couple of layers, just splitting them and filling them. And then I'm also supporting them like I would cakes that were of different sizes. In this case, the next tier will just be the same size and all covered with the same icing. So I'm using a cake plate that's just slightly smaller than the diameter of my cake. And these plates that I use have pillars that lock into them. And then I cut the pillars the exact height of the cake and press the whole thing down into the cake, and then it's a very sturdy support for the next layers of cake. So, and then I would, on top of this plate, I would put my double-sided sticky tape that I'm in. And then on top of that will go another cake board that has been cut to the size of my cake. And then I would add some ganache or icing here and continue to stack the cake. So let me explain how I have this set up here so far. I have my turntable. On top of that I have a small piece of the non-skid. Then I have what's called a prep board or a working board. And actually the larger acrylic discs work great for that because they're washable. And on top of that I have my acrylic disc, one of them, the 8.5, on the bottom of the 8-inch cake. I have another very small piece of the non-skid on top of the acrylic board. And then I have the cardboard that my bottom cake is setting on, and the cake is attached with a little bit of ganache to that board and then stacked as I showed. Okay, next I'm going to take my ganache. It's rather a firm consistency, almost like peanut butter or something. And that's what I'm going to use to put on top of the cake. So I want to put a pretty good layer of the ganache on top of the cake here. And when working with the ganache, for a lot of purposes, I like to have my cakes chilled before I'm frosting them, especially for fondanting and things. But in this case, if your cake is chilled, the fondant is going to firm up as soon as you put it on there. So that doesn't work so well. So your cakes kind of have to be at room temperature. So you want to work with them a little bit gingerly so you don't move them out of place or anything. And if you find that your ganache is a little too firm, you can always put it in the microwave for just a few seconds and give it a stir, and that will soften it up a little bit, but yet then it would still be a rather firm coating for later on when you add your fondant. You'll have a nice good surface there for being able to smooth out your fondant. So once I have the top covered in the ganache, I'm going to take the disc that I have added some of the ganache just on top of the disc, and I'm going to place it on top of this, and I let it sit up enough so that it's firm enough I can just flip it over, and I'm going to press it down there. And at this point there's two things we want to do. We want to center it, and we want to make sure it's level. So to center it, you want to put one of your straight edges on one side of the acrylic discs and line them up, and you want to do the same thing on the other side. And then turn your turntable around just small increments, and be sure and be touching both of the acrylic discs, because what you want is the cake to be centered inside the two acrylic discs, so you get an even coating of the ganache on top of here. And this same technique works for buttercream icing that is made with butter also. Another thing, if your cake had been chilled, the top that you just put on there, it would have set in place right away, so there wouldn't be any wiggle room for scooting the top disc at all. So you want to be working with a room temperature cake. And using the 1/2 inch difference of the acrylic disc gives you a little more room for if your cakes are bulging out or anything like that. You don't have to be quite so precise. So that seems just about right for that. So now we have the circles. Make sure that they're all lined up. The two acrylic circles are lined up. Now we want to check to see if our cake is level. Whoa, that was pretty good. Look at that. That's nice and level there. And you want to do that in several different positions. Okay, so now it's not level on this side, so I want to kind of press down on this side and get it to line up so that it's generally in the center there. My cake seems nice and level. So the next thing we want to do is add our ganache to the sides. And I want my ganache just a little bit softer for that. So I'm going to put it in the microwave for just a few seconds. I'll be right back. So now I have my cake all ready to apply the ganache to the sides. And I've softened up the ganache just a little bit. And what I want to make sure and do is get plenty of ganache up in this little crevice up here that's right next to the acrylic disc, so I get a nice sharp edge to my ganache, and that's going to make it so I can have a nice sharp corner for my fondant if I want to add fondant on top of this. I keep mentioning that Ganache is great for an undercoating for fondant because it gives you the nice sharp edges for fondant covering, but of course Ganache is beautiful and delicious all by itself, so it's not necessary to cover this with fondant. It's just whatever you, or if you're in business, what your customer might want. So I'm going to make sure I get lots of the Ganache up here that's going to go and make a nice sharp edge there on the corner. So I'm going to make sure I'm filling in any air bubbles or anything that might be there. And then I'm just going to cover the rest of the cake with Ganache, and it needs to stick out far enough that it will come out to the depth that the cake circles do, the acrylic cake circles. So I'll just continue adding the Ganache to the sides, and then I'll jump to the end when I've got it all covered and show you how we start to smooth it. So I have the cake all covered in the Ganache now, out to where I think it's going to meet the acrylic disc. But what I want to do is make sure the bottom of my scraper here fits onto the working board that I've got, and then also at the top it hits the other board, and then I just want to scoot it around, and as I get excess there I want to scrape that away. I'm using my palette knife because that's a nice surface that really takes it away quickly. And so I just want to continue going around the cake like this and taking away the excess. Again, always make sure that your scraper is all the way down to the surface. Otherwise you might be hitting the cardboard that the cake is sitting on, and your cake would not be, the Ganache would not be lining up with the top acrylic disc and the bottom acrylic disc. So I'm going to go around, and if I notice any spots that have a gap, air bubbles and things, I can go back and fill that in. So I see a spot right here that I want to fill in, so I'll just take a little bit of Ganache and put it right in that opening, and then as I go around it'll fill in. And so then I just want to put my scraper up and go back around where I added that and kind of clean up that spot. And keep watching for any others that you might need to fill in. Okay, so I've got what I think the gaps are filled in here. And then I want to use hot water with my scraper. And I'm just using an electric pot that I have to keep the water warm. And it's not the water that I want on here, it's the temperature. So I'm going to wipe off the excess water and then go around. And one way you can tell if your scraper has hit both of the discs is just to look at the discs on the side, and if you can see the actual acrylic there versus some of the Ganache on top of it, then you've went all the way to the disc. And if you have a little ridge up here, then you just want to take your palette knife or spatula and then just go and pull in towards you and take that off. And then I'm going to refrigerate this for probably around half an hour for this size of cake. And because then I'm going to remove the top and show you how that's done. After I've let my Ganache set up, I'm going to remove my top disc here. And the first thing that I want to do is peel back my plastic, my sealable plastic that I've used, and make sure and work it off of the edge of the disc, because I'm going to remove the disc first. Once I have the sealable plastic off of the edge of the disc, then I'm going to work in here with my palette knife and just make sure that I can lift this up. I want to scoop my palette knife around the edge and get it started to release there. And then I'm going to lift off my disc. And then once I have the disc removed, I want to peel back the plastic off of the top of the cake. So And there's the top of my cake surface after I've removed the acrylic disc with the plastic on it. And what I've done now is just take some of the ganache and warm it up quite a bit. And then if there's any gaps in here, like I've got a little really small one over here, I'm going to fill that in with a little bit of ganache. And looks like maybe on the edge there, but really it came out pretty good. And by putting that thin layer of the ganache directly on the top acrylic disc before I put it on the cake, then that eliminates a lot of the air bubbles and gaps. Now what I want to do to remove the bottom acrylic disc is do what I did on the top and warm up my palette knife and kind of run it along the top edge of the acrylic plate. You're going to have another cardboard circle in there, remember, and under that cardboard circle will be the non-skid that you placed. And then I'm going to have a larger spatula to scoot that over with and scoot it over onto a larger cake board. And before I handle it anymore, I would let it set, and the ganache will get a nice crust on it and be less likely to get damaged when you go to set it on another tier.